timer out there. So, you guys have heard a little bit of our story. As you can tell, there's a lot more to it than that we haven't had time to share. But we have learned a few things along the way, and one of the things that we have found to be most important is communication during everything. I mean, because the situation you have with a special needs kiddo affects everything, and it adds a whole layer of complexity that, you know, it got to the point where even we had to work out where I was calling her from the office like maybe once or twice a day, and I would call her, and the only reason I was calling was to touch base with her, just to see how her day was going and stuff like that. And I found out after doing that for a while where I sensed a growing level of non-appreciation for that call. and I think I finally just asked her, and I said, I don't, why do you seem so upset when I call you? And she goes, Jared, I got a million things going, and you're calling, and you're not there. You don't need anything. It's like you're just one more task on my list for the day. And I was like, okay, I didn't know that was how it was coming. I thought it would come across as a loving husband that's thinking about you during the day.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I'm sorry, honey. But there was no purpose, and I don't do phone calls. It's like I don't have time to talk on the phone without a purpose, right? I don't have time to chat about anything.
So here I am, because I don't remember like doing that before Micah. I did it specifically because of Micah, because of the added stress and all the stuff we were dealing with. And so that was one of those experiences where we found out, you know what?
It was done out of love. I knew it was done out of love, but it wasn't loving on my end.
Which is a perfect example of some of the stuff we're going to talk about now when it comes to communication, because that can happen, and there's a million opportunities for that to happen. So with communication, it's a complicated thing, and some people have thought about it. Some of us stumble into it, and others of us have put real thought into it, and we've tried to learn some things about it. But communication has got a lot of variables in it, and one thing is you have two different people, right? And we're all different. You have two different. Typically, you have, like in the case we're talking about is as a couple, you're talking about two different genders. Communication is like on two different planes when it comes to that. And then you got personality that fits in and all that kind of stuff. And so learning some of these basics on communication has helped us tremendously. And we've been able to kind of refine them a little bit. And we're going to sprinkle in a bunch of stories again of how it's played out in our life, and maybe you guys have some stuff that you've done and you'll be able to apply it as well. So we're going to cover this in two different ways. We're going to talk about there's two parts of communication, right? What are the two parts of communication? Talking and listening, right? You got one person that's actually verbalized, the other person that's supposed to be listening to it. And so there's two things that we have to be good at to be good at communication. Which one do we tend to want to improve on? Talking. Why do we want to improve talking so much? Or the verbal part of communication?
So the other person understands.
Because we want, and why is it that we want them to understand? Because what we have to say is what? So important. It's like, and we're going to talk about that in a second, so I don't want to get there too fast, but we believe that what we have to say is so important, so we have to communicate it so well. But the fact that we're not focused on becoming good listeners implies what? The reciprocal of that about who's talking to us.
That's not important.
It's not as important. Because I'm not spending any time trying to understand the other person as much as I am trying to understand how to just relate mine. you can see the intrinsic issue that's built in there. So where are we going to start? We're going to start with listening. Okay? How do we listen well? My take on it is that most people want nothing more than someone to care enough to listen to them. You can talk to anybody. You can talk to yourself. You can go out for a walk and you can talk to the trees and just talk out loud. You can do that anytime. But to have somebody hear you, you have to have another person. And many people feel very alone because no one cares enough to listen to them. And it affects your emotions, it affects your value, your perceived value when people don't value what you're talking to. So James 1:19 says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How many of us do that exactly opposite? All three of those things, we do, by nature, we do exactly opposite. So, one example of this, that particular application of this is an example of how this stuff we're talking about is not natural, it's supernatural. Okay? By nature, we do things typically that are counterproductive to the best end result, just because we're broken. Each one of us, we're all broken, right? That's our starting point. So, one of the best examples that we got to walk through with this was a little bit about Marisa and I. So we had been married quite a while. So this has been going on quite a long time. And I might tell you the other story that got us to this point too. But when Marisa would come to me and she would have a problem, like something happened that day or something that we're working on or whatever the case may be, and I'd come over from work and we'd have dinner and we'd sit around, we'd be talking, and she'd be telling me, I've got this thing and blah, 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 blah.
Not quite that dramatic.
And it's just what it sounded like. And what would I do? I'm a fixer.
Yep.
Okay? I feel pretty competent in a lot of areas, and my ideas are really, really good, and I've been successful, and so I can fix you. I can help you, right? That's kind of was my mindset. And so she wouldn't even get through the entire thing that she wanted to say. And I would say, hey, hon, hold on a second. I said, okay, so this is what you need to do. Blah, 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 blah. And I would just never get a positive response. And I could never figure that out. It was almost like she was upset. I would just go, I don't understand. I'm helping you fix your problem. So finally, I got to a point in my life where I actually said to her, I said, tell me why you get upset. And she told me, she goes, Jared, why don't you tell him what you...
Yeah,
I forgot you're in here with me.
Thanks, hon.
No, I'm sorry, different from in there.
I finally just said, hun, I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. Because more than likely, I knew the fixing. I didn't want him to step into that role. I just wanted him to be heard. And so, and usually we had our conversations at night in bed because we have so many stinking children. We couldn't have a conversation until it was bedtime. So finally you just would, and then my wise husband, who I trained since college when we got married, started to.
So I told her, I said, okay, can we try? And I did this at a very unemotional time, not in the middle of one of these things. And another time I came up with this idea and I said, okay, hon, how about if we try this? When you come to me and you come to me with a problem, I'm going to ask you, and it'll be all legit. I'm going to ask you, is this a fix it or a listen? And whatever you want it to be, that's what we'll do. She goes, absolutely, let's try it. And so I did it, and I had to do it for a very short period of time. When it worked so well, we would just kind of do it. It would just kind of happen naturally, and I didn't even have to ask anymore. And ever since we did that, I really can't think of another time that it happened when I breached that chasm by not just listening to her and doing a fix it when she was talking to listen. But I had to be quick to hear and slow to speak. That's how that happened. And so I had to learn that I had to put her needs ahead of what I thought needed to be done. So one of the underlying things with communication is that you got to care about the other person as much as you care about yourself. It can't be a one-sided thing. Now, some application here, 4 tips for listening well. Okay, number 1 is give focused attention. Now these are basic. This is nothing earth-shattering or anything you haven't heard, but it's a good reminder to us in the context of what we're talking about. Is give focused attention. Proverbs 7:24 says, "Listen to me and be attentive to the words of my mouth." So how do we pull off giving focused attention? Well, the first thing is eye contact. How many of you like it when you're talking to somebody and they're looking away?
That's what we live.
That's well. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say though, I think you're right, but many of us live with not only children but possibly spouses who are on the spectrum, and
Right.
so I know that my husband is not going to give me full eye contact because he's listening to me, because he can't focus
Yeah.
on what
But
I'm
we
saying
understand
to
what you're
him.
saying.
We do
Yes.
understand what you're saying, but I just wanted to throw that out.
And that's
It's so
exactly good
important.
point.
My husband is not diagnosed, but I am fairly certain that my husband and mother-in-law both are on the spectrum. Very, very super high functioning, to use that language.
Right.
And that's where it probably comes from genetically from my daughter. And so he's gonna talk to me like this a lot of the time. Now he'll look at me in the eye a lot sometimes.
Right.
But
And I can't be offended by that. And
Right.
sometimes he also does this. He's been doing it for years. He closes his eyes while he's talking to me, so his face is facing me. He closes his eyes.
Right.
So we also, I think in some of these communication things, we need to take our spouse's individual quirks and things into consideration.
Absolutely.
Because if I spent time being offended, he didn't look me in the eye,
You'd be offended constantly, right?
I'd forget it.
And the other thing is, to that point, is that if you care enough to find out, and that's really the point of these are some generalities, but the fact is that as we get to know each other, when you care enough to get to know each other, you accept those things about your spouse, right? Like me, not to this day, I have no idea why she sits there and wants to talk about something and not fix it. I don't understand the point. Just like she didn't understand the point of me calling her with no point in the conversation. But that was okay for her to shut me off, but I still have to listen to her. But what do you do?
Shut you off. I just said this is not a good
You
time.
did.
Okay, well maybe I
But
did.
the reality is that those things are no longer a breach between us. We've accepted those things, and it's not an offense. It's not something in the middle of our relationship. It's going, okay, I don't understand it, which we'll get to in a second, but I accept that. And so I know that we're communicating okay. Sincere acknowledgement. So not just given just say, oh, okay, I got it. Yeah, I got it. But to actually communicate to the person that's talking to you that you appreciated what they said and maybe how they said it, not exactly what they said. That doesn't always have to happen. Number 2 is listen with acceptance and understanding. Okay? Now, it's important to understand the difference between acceptance and agreement. Okay? I didn't say you got to listen with agreement to everything that's said. Listening with acceptance is the whole premise of it is it's about who's sharing it, not what's being shared. Okay? If our spouse is the most important person to us and we're trying to build into this relationship, then we need to care enough about them to say, I value listening to what you're saying because of who you are. I may completely disagree with what you're saying. That's a whole different topic. And the second thing is understanding your spouse, which is to your guys' point. Understanding your spouse, and what I have written down here that I keep reminding myself of is You need to be a student of your spouse. And so we won't camp there, but we've just listed like 4 different examples of how you're a student of your spouse, where you go, oh, I get it. And we're going to talk here in a second about another illustration of when we had a miscommunication on my part that was an offense until I understood what it was. One of the things that listening with acceptance and understanding, I struggle with Marisa, is that when I'm listening to her sometimes, I get frustrated with her when she's talking to me. Like she'll be talking and I'm kind of listening, but I'm doing something, and she'll say, "Okay, is it you got that?" or you know what I'm saying, or whatever and he's go, "Yeah, I got it." It's this whole idea of not responding with a way that is positive. Number 3 is ask clarifying questions and make summarizing statements. So this can even happen during a conversation. So especially at a point where it's something new, or it's something you may not agree with, or it's something that is has a little more chutzpah to it, is you say, "Are you telling me that whatever?" To clarify, am I hearing you correctly? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, we might have a different conversation than we're going to have. Can you tell me more about what you meant when you said this? Things that you want to try to avoid is, I say this kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's not. It really is literal. Things to avoid when clarifying is repeating with disdain, rolling of eyes, and huffing. Okay? That does not qualify as clarifying or summarizing. Okay? That's going to just cause problems. The use of sarcasm typically is not accepted as a confirmation that you heard what I said.
Yes, you can say that from experience, can't
I have very rarely used sarcasm here.
you?
And then here's the classic one. Is you repeat back to them what they said, right? So are you telling me that you're saying this, this, and this, and then at the end you add, are you crazy? Some expletive at the end that lets them know categorically that I think you're an idiot and I don't plan on doing anything that you just said. That doesn't count as a clarifying or summarizing statement. So we want to stay away from that. My like epitome of this communication thing happened. Jeremy's 17.
As a senior, was it preschool?
It was. So it was 17 years ago that I learned this lesson.
Oh, no. Well, it wasn't 14 years ago.
14 years ago. Yeah, 14 years ago. So
We have 2 younger children, like our poor younger children. So I was trying to do something fun for the youngest.
and so somehow I find out that she has enrolled him in some like preschool thing.
I
Okay.
can tell you're thrilled about it.
One day a week.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah,
I mean,
already you know the story.
it was like some major thing like this, right? And immediately, man, I was boiling. I was so mad. And I didn't know anything about it except that she had signed him up for this thing. And I remember standing in the door of the kitchen, and she was at the other end of the kitchen. And I had kind of thought this through, like, how am I going to handle this? And I decided to handle it the inappropriate way. And I walked into the doorway, and I just looked at her, and I said, I cannot believe that you did that without consulting with me. I said, are you going to wear the pants in the family now? Do you want to run the checkbook, and do you want to take care of the car? You want to do everything? Are you after some type of like running this place? I mean, I went over the top, literally lost my crap on her. like she was like this was some type of ploy, like of anarchy on a ship, you know. This poor little young lady stood at the other end, and she had this look of absolute, I have no idea what just happened to me. Like she couldn't even come up with even a partial thought of what just happened. And but I made her answer me. I said, "Are you?" And she said, "No, I'm not trying to do any of that." I said, "Then why in the world would you make a decision like that that affects our child without coming and talking to me?" And she said, "Well," she said, "you do so much for our family, and you have so much on your plate. This is something I felt I could do that I didn't have to put it on your plate and bother you with, but I thought it was good for our son, so I was doing it to help you out."
It was just a non-issue in my mind.
Oh, complete non-issue.
And it really was.
Which
a
is
non-issue.
what it was, right? And so I had
I didn't yell at you. I didn't get mad.
no.
I
She was literally
'Cause I
she was broken.
I could have.
And
Right back.
I had the sense about me in this particular time too, is I went and thought about that for just a couple minutes. It wasn't like a long time, and I came back and I said, "Okay. So you're telling me that there was no, I don't remember exactly what I said, but basically there was no malice or ill intent. I mean, this was just done out of," and she's like, in her mind, she's going, like, yeah, because I don't know how else it could be interpreted, right? And what I learned is about my wife that I already knew, but I didn't give her credit for, is my wife, I can trust her that she doesn't do things or isn't doing things outside of what it is that we've established as a couple and how we're going to raise our family and raise our kids and all kind of stuff, that she doesn't do that. I mean, you could tell, literally her response was, you could tell there was no way that was even in her universe that she would think of doing that. And that was something I had to learn then. And since that time, literally, I have never assumed a negative or ill motive in what she does that affects either our relationship or whatever. I always give her the benefit of the doubt first because of where we're at. All right. Fourth thing of this is focus on what's being said, not the way it's being said. Very, very difficult for us to do, but it is so important. Here's the difference. This is the best way to think about it, is when you're communicating something and you're the one that's emotional about it because you're the one that's the partaker to the other person, or the giver to the other person, okay? To make yourself devoid of whatever emotion or situation that is and communicate it is very difficult to do. You got to remember that as the listener, that whatever is happening here, just separate it and just listen to what they're saying, not how it's being said. People will say, "I heard what you said, but I know what you meant." I heard what you said, but I know what you meant. What is somebody doing when you say that as a listener? When you say that back to someone, what does it mean to the person who communicated?
That you actually didn't believe me or take me seriously.
Yeah. I heard what you said, but I know what you meant. You're hiding something. You said something, but I know what you mean. And you're putting intent into what they said that may not be there because for some reason you have divine intervention that you know all things, right? In that moment, you know all things. Turn it around, and how does it feel to you if someone says that to you? I heard what you said, but I know what you meant. and they think you mean something different than you are. What is that? That's offensive, right? I mean, it's like, that's not what I meant at all. And you're now all of a sudden you're defending it. So we don't want to do those things. Now, so that's how to listen well. Now, how do we express ourselves well? The other side of it. I've had to really work on this because if you haven't been able to tell,
They're shocked.
I'm not an introvert by nature. Okay, and I like to deal with things like right now. This whole thing of like processing and kind of coming up with, it's like, no, that's for the birds. I'd rather just deal with it right now. So I've had to work on this. So number one, carefully chosen words are the best way to express thoughts, feelings, and emotions, which assumes that you have to think before you speak. Just take a moment to think before you speak. Our lives, especially with a special needs kiddo insected in them, our lives are too emotionally charged to be just flippantly flipping around words. We were talking about what doctors tell us and what teachers tell us and what our neighbors tell us and all that kind of stuff. Words are we can get caught up, and there can be action points that go with stuff. So we have to do this. Now, we found out, we recognized Eric. My daughter played volleyball at UCA, and Eric was working the games back then, and so we got to connect here.
We knew him
But
from somewhere.
there's a term in volleyball, which he knows, and that Coach McFatrick always used, and that is improve the ball. Mm-hmm. Improve the ball. So whatever ball comes to you as a volleyball player, you do whatever you can, even if it's a crappy ball, you do whatever you can that when it leaves you, it's better than how it came to you, okay? And that is what we want to do with how we express ourselves, is we want to improve the situation, whatever the situation is. So how do we do that? You respond, don't react. Respond, don't react. So it's most urgent with people like me. Now, I don't know, do we have any, this is not in a negative sense, but it's just kind of typical. Do we have any exploders in here? Okay, we do. Immediate reaction, okay? And then we have stuffers. Who are the stuffers? Okay.
My husband.
Okay, so for the exploders, this one is absolutely cardinal rule number one. Whatever you immediately want to say, do not say it. Do not say it. Most of the time, it's going to be either the wrong thing or it's going to be said in the wrong way. One of those two is almost absolutely true. Okay? Think about it. Just think about the last 24 hours, right? Okay? So, we have the gift of reaction. So, if your house got broken into by, a robber, you're getting glad that we're around because we're ready to move right away instead of process this and say, okay, let's think about what we should do here, okay? So we have gifts, just like autism. It's a gift, right? We got to remember that. And remember that responding, for those of you who are the exploders, responding means you have to think longer than 2 seconds. Okay, that's not thought. Okay, that's just an excuse to say I thought before I did it, but it's not really, it doesn't count. Number 2 is, guys, we all have to be patient in our communication. Almost nothing is as urgent as it feels. Just think about how your communication would improve if you took the urgency out of many things that aren't that urgent, how it would just bring the energy level down. I mean, trust me, every human being I've ever worked with or known, as soon as they get to know me enough, they feel comfortable, they say, Jared, just bring the energy down.
Your children say that.
Like everybody, like I said, everybody who knows me, just like, bring the energy down. It just comes out, right? So I've had to work on that. They're not as urgent as they feel most of the time. Here's another thing. None of us are as right or inexpendable as we think we are. We're not as right as we think we are. I'm not saying we're never right. I'm not saying what we're going to say isn't right, but we're not as right as we think we are most of the time. Because we're thinking about one side of it. Okay? So 4 tips for expressing yourself. Number 1, so we already talked about this one. I didn't go to it first. Think before you speak. Just determine what it is that you want to say and how it is that you want to say it. But not only how, but when. When is the best time to say it? Guys, the reality, well, we're going to get to that. Not everything that you think needs to be said needs to be expressed at all. And if you've probably stumbled across this at least once, but we think that we need to say it. Has anyone ever watched the Netflix series Longmire? Okay. Longmire would be a great character of understanding this right here. There are so many. This guy's a sheriff in a little town in Wyoming, right? He's just this chill dude, just totally like opposite of me.
Antithesis.
Just absolutely opposite of me. I mean, he speaks in one-word sentences and just all this kind of thing. And he's a sheriff, so he's working with a lot of high-energy stuff. And the way they have this character out, he is just the epitome of. There are just times I literally watch. We're watching the series right now, and I'll watch it, and I literally watch his character to learn from it on communication, because you can see it actually playing out, even though it's scripted and it's not real. But it does. They do a really good job with it, and I go, oh, that's the time when he kind of looks at the person who talked to him, and I said, oh, I would have said this, this, and this. And he turns and walks away, and you kind of see what happens, and you go, oh, that's a better outcome. I never even thought about that option, right? So, doesn't need to say it. Sometimes silence is the best way to do it. Number 3, the same thing as a listener. This is on the 4 tips.
What was 2?
What was 2? Did I skip 2? Not everything that you need to say needs to be expressed.
Got
The number 1 was think before you speak. Okay. All right. Ask to make sure that you're being understood. So a listener can use clarifying statements. As a communicator, you can do those same things, and you hear this often. I shouldn't say off. You don't hear it as much as you should, but you can hear it if you listen to people talk. So they'll be sharing with you, and they'll say, do you understand what I'm saying? Just partway through the thing, they want to make sure that you're keeping up with where they are so they feel comfortable that they can go to the next thing and do that. We can do that in our communication as well. One of the things that does is it tells the person that you're communicating with that you care as much about them as you do what you're saying. If all you're doing is communicating information and you don't care if they understand or not, or even are understanding what you're saying, that says something to them about your motive, about why you're saying what you're saying. Here's another rule that I've learned from professional communicators. It is easier to change the way that you communicate than one understands communication. It's easier for you to adjust how you say something than it is for someone to change how they receive communication. It's just, don't ask me why. I mean, I'm just saying it's a proven fact. So we can work, if you're going to work on something, work on how you speak. Okay?
True.
All right. And number 4 is speak in a way that encourages. Now remember, we're talking, this is in general for communication, but especially in our situations. Speak in a way that encourages. So how do we do that? You watch tone. You watch volume. And you watch nonverbals. So supposedly, according to some sources,
You have a PhD in all of those.
I have a lot of nonverbal ability. I think I speak probably 90% of what I say comes through. I've never been able to lie to her, literally. I've never lied to my wife. And even if I can try, meaning like kidding around or something, she's just like,
Look at me.
she goes, you're lying. And I go, and we do it for fun now because I haven't had to do it. But your nonverbals, and what you'll know when people say that is you go, someone will say, well, I know what, they tell you what you said. You go, well, I didn't say that. And you go, oh, you said it all right. That's when you know your nonverbals got out of hand. I know what you said, but I know what you said. All right. I've got if you guys want to do this, when we do our Tangle House seminar, and we get to we did this when we did a weekend one time with an organization. But I've got, they're just 6 simple questions. But as far as communication goes, they're date night questions. So we had a date night planned. I had some stuck in my folder and I thought, I'd throw them out for this one. So if you guys want to take one of these before you go, they're just 6 questions that will stimulate some discussion on a date night. And so go with your significant other and walk through these, and you can talk about some of the things that, well, some of you are in this session alone, some of you are together, and you can communicate and talk about some of the things you learned. And if you're here by yourself, and you might go and have a date night or talk about what happened today with your significant other, is probably the best way to share some of the principles you've learned about communication is to talk about what you've learned about yourself.
Yes.
That's going to open up the door to be able to share more and increase their interest level. And especially, even if you came back from this deal, the next time you saw him, you say, there's one first thing I want to tell you is this. I am so sorry that and it's just going to be something you learned. Mm-hmm. And you're going to tell them, and they're going to be sitting there going, and they're not going to know what to say. And you go, ooh, point for me.
Yeah.
No, wrong edit.
Oh, is that not what it is? Is that not the motivation? Okay. All right. Any questions on anything?
No, that was excellent.
We have learned this
And practiced it for
the hard way
years.
and had to flesh this out. But I will tell you this. It is so worth it. And when you're trying to pull the wagon in the same direction with somebody, this part of it makes life. We talked about those realities and bringing the energy. There's some burdens of our life that we can't. We just have to learn. You just learn to suck them up. But there's some that we carry that we don't need to. This is one of them. Having the thing with your spouse that you're going through with this, that is there. This can be really, really good, which makes it just easier to deal with all that. And to be able to have open, healthy, honest conversation where you're looking to better each other and to help each other, and it's not going to be a win-lose or a blame game, all that kind of stuff. Now it takes time to get there. I don't know, everyone's going to start at a different point, but it's really important.
I think for a lot of us, like there's the parent that feels like they're doing all the work with that child, and then the parent that's maybe doing all the work bringing in income for the family, and you're both fighting to be understood, And if we just take time to listen to each other, then we can respect each other for all the different roles that we play.
Exactly. And when this relationship is where it needs to be, the relationship, your child senses it. Special needs kids, they sense it too. When there's friction, irritation, they can use it to use against you, but also you are better as a team and loving your child. If you give them 20 minutes less to focus on this, it benefits them way more than that 20 minutes loss. You have to stick a video in and say, this is mom and dad's time, you cannot have it. That is the ultimate.
Can't say that
that's
out loud, they will find you.
That's
Typical
right.
teens
That's an
do that
invitation.
too. But it's just if we can't implement or give you anything else, that's what the paradigm of that special needs child is. They are not the center of everything. They shouldn't be, and you'll be better equipped if you're a better team. That is loving your child better. It's just hard to comprehend that, especially as moms. So young people, remember that.
And you, with the different roles, right? Again, probably the best way to do it is to lead with seeking to understand how they're viewing your situation, how it affects them at work, how it affects them coming home, how it affects them, and kind of lead the way, leave the breadcrumbs for them to be able to engage with you. Doesn't mean you can never bring up your side, that you want to be understood better by the one that's out, going to work every day and escaping all of this. But there's no doubt there's a give and a take, and it grows over time, and it can happen. Okay. All right. Well, you guys get to grab.